The main character, a boy, tells us that in his family, his mother suffers from an incurable disease, his father is monstrous, his younger sister is spoiled, and that only a bad end awaits this family. He also reports that he, disguised as Reed Baldia, decided to live honestly and change the future. A man stands with a serious expression. A girl with 2 ponytails and a toy in her hand smiles. The man announces that it's finally a break, and the girl addresses him as Kanda-senpai. The girl asks him how he liked the game she recommended. Kanda-senpai recalls that a few days ago she asked him to definitely try it, and agrees that it's that otome game. He says that the game was very interesting and that he didn't expect this. The girl says she's glad he liked it and notices the bags under his eyes. Kanda, smiling, clarifies that everything went well. Kanda-ichi says he's an ordinary 33-year-old office worker who loves games and anime. The company pays for overtime and allows him to take days off, and that life was enough for him. Kanda-iti says that employees often have drinking parties with business partners, while he stays glued to games all night. He explains that he didn't notice how his body reached its limits. The last thing he remembers is the figure of his mother, who died several years ago. He opens his eyes and looks up, then looks at the unknown ceiling and asks where he is. He explains that he seems to have passed out while waiting for a traffic light, and then begins to lift the blanket. Kanda-iti says that her legs and arms are too short, then tries to get up and, seeing herself in the mirror, screams, "Who is this?" The maid asks if Mr. Lid is awake and says he needs to tell everyone. Lid reacts with surprise to the maid and to being addressed as Mr. Lid. Someone reports that he's fine. A woman and 3 girls say they're glad he's okay. He asks who all these people are. The man says they were very scared when he passed out in the garden. The man says he's Lid's servant, Garn. Lid apologizes for worrying everyone. The maids froze in surprise. Lid asked if he'd said something wrong. Garn thanked him for the words, but said it was too much praise for them. The servant asked to simply call him Garno. Lid thanks Garno. Garno warns that if he needs anything, he should just ring the bell. Lid asks what's going on and suddenly clutches his head. He reports that his head is pounding and memories are entering his head. He remembers being an ordinary Kanda-iti who works for the company. He then denies this and calls himself Reed Baldia. Lid reveals that he is a supporting character, Reed Baldia, who appears in the otome game Tokurima, that he played and must help the villain who is interfering with the main character. He says he needs to figure out what's going on here and pulls the bell. The maid comes running and asks what happened, to which he explains he was just checking and doesn't need to bow. He asks if he'll be 7 this year, and the girl replies he turned 6 last month. He asks her to tell him about this country and his family. The maid says they're in the Magnolia Empire, near which there are many beastmen, dark elves, and other races. Lid belongs to the family of Margrave Baldia. Among the nobility there are neutrals, conservatives, and reformers, but the Baldia family is mostly neutral. She continues that father Reed Baldia, mother Nanali, and younger sister Meldy live together, and the father occasionally goes to town to resolve political issues. Lid notes that everything is just like in the game. The maid inquires if the boy is really feeling well. Lid says he is and asks not to worry. Lid falls into a memory. The maid screams his name. Lid recalls that in the past he was capricious and everyone was afraid of him. He apologizes for his behavior to the maid, which surprises her. Lid asks her name, and she tells him it's Danae. Lid calls it a beautiful name, expressing his pleasure at meeting her. The girl says she's also pleased to meet him and calls it sweet. Danae asks Lid to wake up. Lid opens his eyes. Lid explains he can't say he fell in love with her outfit and denies anything happened to it. The girl offers to help Lid change, but Lid declines, saying he can handle it himself. Lid sits at a large table with food, notices the surroundings, and explains that this is what aristocratic life is like. Lid asks why he's alone at such a large table. The man explains that Mr. Liner is currently in town, and Mrs. Nanali isn't feeling well, so she's in her room. Lid says he'll go check it out later and thinks she'll be happy to see him. Lid recalls that his mother didn't even have a name in the game. He wonders what kind of character she is. The girl invites them in and points to the door. Lid is silent. The girl informs them that the lady is unwell today and suggests rescheduling the meeting for another day. Lid explains that it seems they haven't seen each other for a long time. The woman says she's fine and coughs. A young man and a maid enter the room, and the young man calls the woman mother. The woman thanks Lid and tells him she learned from Garn about Lid's collapse in the garden and asks if he's okay. He says he's fine and is glad to see her. Nanali apologizes for worrying the children and says she feels better now. The woman smiles and laughs, and Lid smiles back. Lid says he'll be back. Lid thinks Garn probably knows. Garn asks Lid if he'd like to know what illness Ms. Nanali is suffering from. Then he says he can't tell. Lid says he's serious about asking if he knows anything, but he also declares he won't stop asking. The man asks Lid to keep Ms. Nanali's illness a secret. The man says it's magical exhaustion. Lid listens to him. He says he shouldn't have said that because of this illness. Every inhabitant of this world has at least a little bit of life energy, which is called magical power. Usually, if it decreases, it regenerates itself, but with magical exhaustion, natural recovery weakens sharply, and then the person dies. Led says he had a hunch it would be the illness Garn mentioned, and explains that Tokarem had a debuff called magic exhaustion, which causes a character's mana to gradually drain when their mana reaches 0, and when it reaches 0, their health begins to decline. Led examines the library and says there aren't enough books in this room, and they need to investigate. Then he spots Meldy's sister. She asks what he's doing, to which Lid asks for help finding me and suggests honoring Meldy with a picture book. She rejoices. The girl asks if this is true. He says it is and only asks him to close the door, and the girl agrees. He reads that the princess asked Owl a question, and she answered that if he brought a golden apple from that valley, she would think about it. He explains to himself that when Meldy was born, Lid was very happy. Memories return. Meldy says her brother can call her Mel too. He's surprised and asks if that's true. The girl explains that her mother always calls her Mel, so her brother can too, because he's important to her. Lid thanks her and says that means he's precious. The girl laughs. He reports that Mel has fallen asleep. The maid comes at the sound of the bell and says yes. Then she carries her sister away in her arms. Garn asks if they were with Mistress Meldy. Lid says he read her books until she fell asleep. The man thanks her and wishes them well in the future. The man reports that Lid has changed a lot since he lost consciousness in the garden and apologizes for saying so. Lid says he doesn't seem to have changed much and asks if it's true. He then explains that he was scared but is surprised that people are comparing him to his past self. He says that, after talking with his family, he knows what to do. In Tokarel, Lid commits a crime with the antagonist. When he is found guilty, he is exiled, but can also be sent to the front or executed. Lid advises that to avoid trial and exile, one must first prevent this. He explains that he needs to befriend the characters in the game and avoid actions that could lead to trial, death, or exile. He explains that the characters live in the city and other lands, so he has little chance of meeting them since he lives in the Margrave's territory, adding that he is a minor character. To do this, he needs to train his strength and accumulate money. Lid explains that these were probably his feelings when he saw his mother's condition, and calls himself kind. Lid says that his beloved mother was weakening, but he couldn't do anything. His heart was breaking, and he hid his bitter feelings. Lid explains that they need to restore family unity, find a way to avoid judgment, and live by the law. He reports that in this world Baldia is 6 years old. He explains that he's now a handsome boy with perfectly matched silver hair and violet eyes. He explains that he can memorize the exact contents of a book he reads. He says he has a super brain. Lid reports finding something interesting in the book, then says he's seen it before. He explains that the plants and ores of this world are named and look exactly like those in the real world. The man tells Mr. Lid that Mr. Liner has returned. Lid says that today is the day his father returned and that he will see him for the first time. He says Garn told his father that Lid wanted to talk to him. Lid hopes everything will go well and opens the door. His father looks at him menacingly. The father says he heard the boy pass out in the garden and asks how he's feeling. The boy is silent, then says he's fine. The father asks what he wanted to talk about. The boy says he wants to ask him for two things and begins to say the first. He asks for a chance to learn magic, martial arts, and receive an education. He explains that he remembered Lid, who was like a character in a game because he can change with training, even though he has very weak initial stats and almost no one to help him, and it takes time to level them up. His father says he thought about it but decided to put it off due to Lid's mental state and asks if he's sure. Lid recalls how hard it was for him to watch his sick mother. Knights Diana and Lubins tell Mr. Lid that they are always ready. Lid greets them and says it's a pleasure to meet them, and he's glad to have the knights guarding him. Lid explains that the Bardian territory is located far from the city, which is why it's called the border, and there's plenty of empty space there for establishing production. He says that growing olives was his dad's idea, but this isn't just any village. Diana says they'll be there soon. Lid says that they didn't come here to have fun, explains that there are things in this city that they want to do with money, and says that it is the largest city in the territory. He sees the city and says, "Wow!" The man asks Mr. Lida not to go far, and he says that Diana was right. The city is very crowded. Lid laughs and agrees with Diana. The girl asks Lid if he's sure they're here. Lid confirms he is. The girl in the cat ear costume greets him and offers to help. Lid notices the cat ears. The girl apologizes for the wait, and Lid tells her he recently sent her a letter. She notices he's the host's guest. The girl says she's a representative of Christie's Chamber of Commerce. Christy Saffron says she's the only elf on the premises. Christy Saffron tells her to go to the reception area. Lid says it's nice to meet you, and she says it's nice to meet you too. Christy asks if they should leave security outside the door and asks if he's sure about that. Lid agrees and explains that he'd like everything they discuss to remain confidential. The woman suggests getting to the point, and Lid asks if she knows what lotion and conditioner are. He learned from a book that aloe vera exists in this world and asked a servant if aloe lotion exists here. She asked what lotion is. He asked if the girl uses lotion after washing her face and if she takes care of her skin. The girl asks what care means. He was surprised that there is no such thing in this world. Lid tells them they have aloe growing in their garden and explains that it helps heal wounds, to which the maid is surprised that such a weed can do such a thing. It dawns on Lid that he could make money from this. Lid explains that he first tried making lotion, then asked if they had conditioner, and then tried making a sample from olives. He asks Christy if she's thought about it, and she replies that she's never heard of it before, and that if it existed, she'd know. The man explains that he doesn't have any items yet. It's just an idea. He says that everything he thought about it could now work out. The girl asks if there are any samples, and Lid says he brought some. Chris says they absolutely need to turn this into a product and asks to call her Chris. The man says he'll give her the air conditioner and asks her to definitely try it. Led explains that after their conversation, they began thinking about next steps and building personal assets, and to do that, they need to find moongrass and moongrass to make a cure for magical exhaustion syndrome. Christy says she never imagined a child would start talking about trading. She announces that she left the Saffron family's Chamber of Commerce and opened her own, never expecting to have to listen to the Margrave's son's ravings. The girl runs after Christy and reports that Mistress Chris is in a good mood. Christy says they'll soon have a lot of work to do. The knight asks Lid if everything worked out. Lid announces that they're now on friendly terms with the Chamber of Commerce. He understands there's no time for doubt, as otherwise a terrible future awaits him. The hooded girl looks around. Lid says she's lost. He asks if she's okay. She replies that she is. He explains that he is from the Margrave's family and thought she needed help. The girl says she is lost and can't find her guide. He says he knew it. He asks where they got separated and says they will help. The girl starts to answer and someone points at her. The woman thanks him for saving her, and Lid says there's no need to bow and that it's obvious the girls need help. The hooded girl looks on silently, first surprised, then embarrassed. The woman tells the princess that, thank God, she's okay and that she was afraid for her. The princess sits embarrassed. She tells the woman that she should have found out the boy's name. The woman says that the princess may have fallen in love. The girl is surprised. Meanwhile, the knight asks Lid if he is sure that he shouldn't have found out the girl's name. He remains silent. Sandra Anist says that she will be his teacher and gives her name, and Lid says that it is nice to meet him too. The guy says he's been waiting for this day and that he seems to be able to use all kinds of magic. Then he's asked if he's ever used magic. He replies that he's never used it, only read about it in books. The woman explains that to use magic, one must convert one's life force into magical force, meaning one must first learn how to do this, and only then can one use magic. She says it's not that simple, but she'll tell you how to do it and urges you to rely on her. Lid listens. She says it would be easier to demonstrate magic in person and suggests going to the training facility, which the guy agrees to. Lid remarks that she loves magic. The woman says that's it. Lid lies on the floor and says it was just torture. The woman says she's just forced Lida to transfer her magical power and explains that it takes a lot of practice to learn to control it on your own. But if someone else forces you to feel the transfer, it'll take much less time. He says it's a bit painful and should have warned her beforehand. She laughs, and he calls her a sadist. The woman says let's try transferring the magical force again and asks if Lid has sensed the source of the magical force. Lid reports that he now feels something inside him. The woman explains that life force is the source of magical force that needs to be transferred into magic and suggests imagining a squeeze to feel the magical force. She asks Lid to transfer the force into his fists. She says that Lid needs to have an image of magic in his head to use it, and it reminds him of the fireball she showed him. She explains that once the magic appears, he needs to pronounce its name, direct it at the target, and use it. He explains that he needs to gather the magical power into his fists. As the teacher showed him, form a ball and direct it at the target. Lid shouts the fireball spell and releases a fireball. The woman with glasses reacts with surprise. Lid shouts that it worked and is happy about it. Sandra says she didn't think it was possible to advance so much in magic in just one day. The woman explains that even if someone has learned to translate magical power, they won't be able to use it right away. It takes a lot of effort to memorize the image, and Lid has a great imagination, perhaps even a genius. He explains that he was able to create several more fireballs and direct them at the target even without a spell. Lid says, "Stand and swing." The man says it's not bad and suggests they practice, to which Lid is surprised and happy. The knight says you can strike anywhere. He says it's good. He and the man fight with swords. Lid is amazed, saying his body feels light and how fun it is to stretch it with a wooden sword. Lid says he feels like he's capable of anything, and that it's all thanks to his superior physical abilities. The man announces that that's all for today, and that Lid might even be better than Mr. Liner. The guy says, "Ugh," then says he's pleased to be praised, but he's never won and feels bad about it. He asks if there's anything he can do about it, and immediately says, yes. Lid asks the knight if he and Diana have been friends since childhood. The knight confirms, saying they lived next door to each other. Lid asks if he likes her. The man reacts sharply and asks what it means. Lid notices the man's face has turned red and asks if he's right. Lid explains that they say maids and knights can't get promoted because Lubens is a coward and can't admit his feelings. Lid sees the timid knight Lubens and thinks he might have overdone it and that he's angry. Knight Diana asks what happened. The boys remain silent. The girl says Lubens is a bit strange and sometimes gets upset over simple things. Lid asks if this is true, and Diana asks what he told Lubens. He said Lubens is afraid of her. Lid notices that he's become uncomfortable, and it's hurt her too. The girl gets angry and says she'll find out all the details and contact Mr. Lid. The girl calls out to Lubens, and he's surprised she's there. She asks if they've finished training and says she has something to talk to Lid about. Lid says it's good. Lid reads fairy tales to her sister Mel on her mother's bed. She laughs. Mel is surprised that the lead is reading by parts and is engaging to listen to. Led explains that this is the correct use of tone. He says he's pleased that Mel is happy, but lately, if he doesn't change his voice while reading, she gets angry at him. Mother says she didn't know about such a wonderful skill on Lead's part and calls him a true theater actor. Mel says she taught him and asks him to praise her too. The woman strokes her daughter's head. Lid notices that she's feeling better today, but her complexion isn't quite right, and explains that not all members of the Baldia family know about the magical exhaustion syndrome that their mother suffers from, which has no natural cure. He says that's all for today because they have a guest. Christy informs Mr. Lid that the product launch is near. Lid is surprised and says he's amazed by Chris's abilities. He explains that after he gave away the lotion and conditioner, he and Chris had several more meetings, and that he couldn't handle production alone, but with her help, it became possible. All that remains is to increase production. He says there will probably be men who will see Chris's beauty and want to give her as a gift to their wives and daughters. The father is surprised, asking if that's really a 6-year-old talking. Lid says yes and thanks him. The father says he'll go to town with a representative from the Chamber of Commerce. Christy says she's not particularly confident, but she'll try. She shows him the moon herb he'd so desperately asked her to find for his mother. He's surprised and asks if that's really it. He explains that using it can slow down the illness. Lid thanks Chris and she encourages him. Christy informs him that there's still some loot grass left, but she can't find it yet, and asks him to wait a little longer. A few days later, her father went to the city to give a gift to their majesties. Then Lid explains that a product for cosmetics is grown in Baldia territory, and the Christie and Saffron Chambers of Commerce handle transportation, sales, delivery, and service, with a portion of the proceeds going to Lid. He's retired from cosmetics development, and his next product will be. He reports that this is a development of a restoration potion made from moongrass. Even if it doesn't completely eliminate the disease, it can stabilize the condition until a miracle cure is created. However, Lid explains that he has no pharmaceutical knowledge. Garn suggests Lid ask Miss Sandra. Lid shows her the moongrass and explains that this magical grass has the ability to restore magical power. Sandra is surprised and doesn't believe that moongrass actually exists. She apologizes for speaking loudly and explains that she used to be the head of the Imperial Laboratory, where they studied a potion to restore magical power. Sandra tells her about her activities in the city. Elite mages were assembled in the city to develop a potion to restore magical power. Sandra, who had long loved magic and left her mark on the study of magic, was appointed head of the laboratory. However, Sandra is surprised why the goods sent last week haven't arrived yet. She reports that the development is late again and says there's nothing to be done. They'll have to change the cooking method. The text block says this has happened before. He starts to worry because they should have compiled the report by now. She sees a woman and apologizes. The woman asks what's wrong. Sandra explains that this is the first time she's seen such a guest in the palace. The woman says she's worried about all the mice running around and asks the lead developer about the progress. The text says some aristocrats don't like the developers. They don't like the fact that they're sending large sums of money to who knows who and for who knows what. People started leaving because they weren't seeing results, and the developers were short-staffed. Sandra left the lab and took over. She reports that she failed to carry out a state order and deserves only execution or exile. She says that she renounced her family, fearing to stir up a scandal with her resignation, and when everyone had already begun to forget. Margrave Laner hired her as a teacher, and that's how she ended up here. Lid says he'll have to make her do the same research again, noting the trouble she's had. He says he wants to save his family and asks for help. Sandra doesn't understand. He explains that his mother suffers from magical exhaustion syndrome. It's a secret, but there's no cure yet, so he wants to make a potion to restore her magical power, to at least prolong her life a little. Lid says he wants the girl to help him make a potion to restore magical power and he needs her powers. She says she'll repay that debt. Sandra says that's good. If he comes over, he'll help. She says she'll do everything to save Mrs. Nanali. The guy thanks her for her help. Lid says that after that, he promised to prepare a lab for Sandra and other things she might need. She was excited. Sandra explains that when she was in the city, she found moongrass, but she was never able to obtain it, and there was no information left about moongrass in the lab, none at all. She says that you can just call her Sandra, but in class you can call her Teacher Sandra. Lid says he's curious about Dad and Chris. Lid smiles. Sandra, with her long hair, proudly shows Lid the object under the glass, and Lid laughs happily. Meanwhile, in the city, Christy reports on what is happening. The woman says the lotion and conditioner are amazing and asks if they could sell the recipe and rights to the Magnolia Empire. Christy yells at Mr. Lid. Liner and Christy are reportedly taking a break on their way to the capital. Liner says they'll be arriving soon and asks if they're ready. Christy says this is rare for her, but she'll do everything in her power. Her father warns her to be vigilant and careful with her words and behavior, explaining that the capital is a terrifying place, and compared to it, a margrave like him seems like a speck of dust. The girl with the ears says she's already spotted someone. He says he admires it every time. The man says that this is a fortified city. The imperial capital of Magnolia is reportedly surrounded by 2 walls. It is said that aristocrats live within the palace walls, and the walls themselves are approximately 5 meters high. It is explained that beyond the walls lies an ordinary city, protected by the wall. The girl explains that even the Elven Kingdom isn't that big. Lid explains that they were told they had offerings and asked to show them, then asks them to wait. The man explains that Mr. Liner has already gone ahead, and they've been standing there for a long time. The knight says he trusts these women. He asks if everything is clear, after which the knight allows them to pass. Then the knight opens the window. The girl with the ears and the girl in the maid's costume explain that the warrior they just saw is Count Lawrence Ward. The man says he didn't know something like this could happen right during the interrogation and admits his guilt for not explaining it. The girl explains that he probably wanted to find out information about the products and apologizes, promising to be more careful. The man notices who they have there and calls him Mark. The man says he didn't expect to see Lid here, and Lid says he hasn't seen Count Laurent in a while. The man explains it's because Lid lives far away. The man asks who the beauty is, and Lid explains that her name is Christy Saffron. The man says that The man reports rumors of a girl escaping from the warehouse, though they're unconfirmed, and asks for calm. He explains he's saying this deliberately to anger Chris, as calling traitors animals is considered an insult. The girl with the ears. The man says this is too much and asks if it's not foolish of them to insult those who have come for an audience with their majesties. The woman says she won't allow Emma to be insulted. The man from the last panel apologizes and says he has business to attend to. All the nobles are in the audience chamber. Emperor Erwin Magnolia says they've kept us waiting. Empress Matilda Magnolia remains silent. Reed Baldia announces his arrival at the palace and apologizes for Christy Saffron having to travel so far. Christy Saffron explains that she is the daughter of Baron Martin Saffron of the Kingdom of Estolia, and that her father was recently given a title. Reed Baldia says he heard. Lid says that if the woman he's talking to is a nobleman's daughter, he's addressed her incorrectly. The man reacts with surprise. Lid explains that she wasn't the strange girl from the Chamber of Commerce at all. The woman asks to try the goods quickly. Lid agrees and asks to see the goods. The woman says she brought the goods. The woman reports that the men have no reaction, but the empress, maids, and servants are interested. He asks if he can touch her hair, explaining that he uses lotion and conditioner himself, to which the woman replies that he can. The woman touches her hair and he talks about. The woman says that only women can understand the true value of such hair and offers to try the lotion. Lid says she's never seen such smooth and shiny hair. The man warns that it can be dangerous to address someone as His Majesty. The woman tells Count Laurent that she's speaking with Christy. The woman explains that it eliminates dryness. She says she's even ready to call it the best product and asks if he's going to bribe all the ladies in the palace. He thanks her. The woman says the lotion and conditioner are amazing and asks if she could sell the recipe and rights to the Magnolia Empire. The woman says she doesn't understand and makes a sound of confusion. The woman says it's good and a pity, but so be it. A man in the crowd asks if they're sure, and someone addresses the queen, calling her Your Majesty. The woman explains that if the people's rights are taken away, the empire will eventually perish, and says they must take advantage of this opportunity. Lid says that in the future, citizens' rights will be more strictly enforced and reserves the rights to produce the lotion and conditioner for the Christie Chamber of Commerce and the Baldia territory. A man asks if everyone agrees, to which another man replies, Yes. The woman reports that suddenly everything started going according to plan. The girl blinks and makes the victory sign. The man turns around sharply, and he looks at him intently and asks, "Is this really so?" Lid says it was all a setup. Lid reports that the Empress's behavior and the acquisition of the lotion and conditioner were part of her plan, the purpose of which was not production or rights. The woman explains that she could have given orders, but that would have been an abuse of power and would have been noticed by other nobles, so she made him promise. He says that he simply danced to her tune and calls it the sound of a loss of pride, adding that he simply. Lid says Chris is a good man and that he told them to be on guard. The woman says their majesties have come to visit them and apologizes for showing up so suddenly during their vacation and for not even greeting them. The man apologizes for that. The woman explains that there is only one exit to the castle, and it is guarded. He explains that if anyone tries to escape, they will be killed. The man explains that they cannot allow anyone to leave alive, and the girl says this is the king's order. Lid explains to Christie that they were forced to participate in this event. He reports that when samples of the lotion and conditioner were made, Margrave Laner had already provided them to their majesties. Lid explains that a gag order was issued in the capital, but rumors began to spread anyway. It is reported that among the aristocrats who heard about the valuable gift from the territory of Baldia, there were those who wanted to claim them, and they set their eyes on this gift. He explains that they got the desired result and thanks for it, and also says that today was a productive day, and the man explains that, since the production rights were given to Chris at the aristocratic meeting, the aristocrats won't be able to simply take them. The woman explains that they understood their intentions so well that she would even like to take them as her servants, and the man explains that he still has something to talk about with Elle. The image does not contain speech bubbles or text other than the chapter number designation. Lid reports that the illness came on unexpectedly. At first she felt tired, but later she was no longer able to stand on her own. She explains that she felt a strange sensation, like something was coming out of her, and like a crack had formed at the bottom of a glass. Lid asks if there's anything she can do about her body. The woman reports that she began to feel like the disease had stopped progressing. She explains that since then, she's been trying to think that way and had terrible sleep until the night before. The woman explains that when he found out about the disease, he started snapping at others, and Mel started crying more often. The woman asks. The woman says the girl is happy today and asks if something is wrong. The lead says he's been acting differently lately and has started talking like a mature person. The girl says, and tells him that her brother read her a book. He explains that he has corrected his behavior and is trying to make friends with his family, and also says that he must not give up. The girl says she can beat this disease and will not give up. Lid says the weather is so nice. Then he announces that today he'll be trying attribute magic, like in the game, listing fire, water, ice, lightning, wind, trees, earth, light, darkness, and void. Then Lid says that Daddy and Chris are trying their magic now, and they should too. He explains that this universe is very similar to the world of the game Tokarella, which he played in a past life. He explains that he obtained the necessary materials and therefore developed the care products, because such a thing could not happen in the game. He explains that if he follows his own path, he will have a completely different life. Lid says it's wonderful. The girl rejoices and says that since Lid summoned the light, she's seen everything and admires it. Lid is surprised and asks since when she did. Then she starts to speak, but pauses. He tells Mel that his magic will be their secret and suggests not telling anyone. Mel explains that she's so beautiful and offers to read Lida any book he wants. He asks to see it again. Then a text appears saying that if everyone finds out, rumors will spread. A few days later, Lid informs us that Margrave Liner was trying to deceive us. Count Laurent was banned from entry, and Empress Matilda is dangerous. Lid says something is strange and asks if something happened. The woman explains that classes are starting soon, and whether special magic requires special skills. The boy explains that it's important to be able to say you don't know something, and teacher Sanera always praises him for it. He explains that it's not quite true. You need to create an exact image yourself or receive one from someone else. The boy asks if this means anyone can use magic, to which he replies that it doesn't matter. The woman says she'll tell you more about receiving it, and Lid explains that only the creator can transfer special magic to another, and both parties must have immense magical power. Lid explains that a great deal of magical power is required, and without both the power and the image, the magic won't activate, and the woman confirms this. He says he hasn't bathed in a while and how nice it is. He explains that in this world, people dry themselves with a hot towel, so baths are rare here. He says he didn't expect to bathe in his room and wonders how much water they use for such an occasion. Then he asks how much water. Lid reports that the numerical standards in this world are the same as in the past: grams, liters, meters, miles. Lid says he has an idea and it's accurate. Lid explains the diagram with measuring vessels to the man with the mustache. He says it's time to start. Lid reports that he filled a liter vessel with water made with magic, poured out the contents and refilled it several times, calling it 1 liter. He says that now he can do it and next time he will try 10 times. He repeats over and over again 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 200, 300 and reports that this way he can concentrate on. Lid says he uses magical power. Water is shown pouring. He says he has 980. He explains that he began to feel his magic power drain with each activation of magic, and that for water magic, 1 liter is a certain amount of magic power that is expended on magic. Thus he has more than 980 magic power. Lid says they need to try magic power measurement. He reports that the magic power level is 80 and tells them to do it again, noting that he heard it in his head. Lid explains that nothing happened. He says that the amount of magic power is 60, then says that it has decreased and it takes 20 magic power to use the magic power measurement. He says that he succeeded. Lid asks if he can ask again. He explains that he wanted to know how much magic power is consumed when activating a spell, so he created a special spell called Magic Power Measurement. Lid says he explained to Sandy the process that led him to create this spell and explains that. He says that he never had such an idea and explains that, in other words, she also has the qualities of the element of water. He reports that this is how it turned out. Lid says Sandra has a strange reaction. The woman explains that this magic is currently unknown to anyone, and if it spreads widely, Lid will be taken to the imperial capital. Lid asks if he's sure about that. He says it's so serious and asks if they'll take him away. The woman explains that anyone with water magic could have figured this out, but sometimes they're not very smart, and suggests discussing it with ordinary people. Lid explains that most ordinary people can't use magical power because they don't know how and can't use magic at all. He says this is only true after they receive a minimum education, but most ordinary people don't receive even a minimum education about magic. Lid says this is understandable. He states that despite it being a fantasy world where magic exists, it doesn't seem to be used everywhere, including in battles, armies, adventurers, and exploration. He explains that it's not for nothing that he didn't see many people using magic in the mansion because people tend to. Lid says it's kind of sad that, in a fantasy world, magic isn't everywhere, and that it's wasted. Lid explains that she couldn't even create a spell that produces exactly 1 liter of water, and that it clearly wouldn't be easy for her, plus she can't use magic. He says he was chosen for the position of director at a research institute in the capital. He confirms this with the words "true." Lid reports that he was crushed by someone else's envy here. He explains that the reason is that he was indeed invited to the capital as a genius. Lid says that he honestly thought this would happen later, while the student's talent was more limited, but he eagerly awaited this day because he wanted to be there. He says it's okay, those who stand out are ostracized by society, but if you stand out too much, no one will ostracize you, and he encourages her not to let the boundaries bind her, but to step outside them. He explains that for now he'll try not to tell anyone about it. The man says that if she knew. Lid reports that they've continued working on creating a drug to restore magical power. Lid explains that these are their materials and suggests trying the moongrass, eating it raw, powdered, and boiled, experimenting with all the different options. Lid explains that the moongrass is too bitter to eat like that. He says he will do everything. Lid reports that no supplements are needed because it tastes very bitter, and notes that 20 units of raw magic power have been restored. The cooked dish restored magical power in an amount of 10 to 30. He says that the bitterness from the towel is only stronger, and for the maximum effect you need to eat the whole thing, and that this is even worse. Lid says you can mix it with water for the strongest effect, but that was the easiest thing to eat, though not very tasty. The text says the powder restores 50 magic power. He explains that turning the powder into tablets would be best for Ms. Nanali. She suggests rolling the tablet around in her mouth before swallowing, perhaps because of the way it's taken. He calls it the devil. The guy says he feels much better and praises her. Lid reports that they've managed to create a drug to restore magical power, and then looks at the other man. The man smiles. The girl asks Lid several times how he's enjoying it, saying she put her love into the dish and asking if it's tasty. He feels pressure. The narrator reports that Sandra seemed to be enjoying herself. Lid says he knows he won't forget and calls the man his teacher. The woman explains that everything will become clear tomorrow anyway and suggests asking Mrs. Meldy everything. Lid says he has a bad feeling about this. The man replies that in that case he won't tell anything. The man asks. He announces that he's back. Turning to Mel. Mel says, "Brother," and congratulates him on his return. He asks Mel. The girl says Lid stinks and he's not her brother. Lid asks what's going on. Lid says no one's approaching him. The woman says that Lid does smell and apologizes. He explains that it's necessary now and suggests taking a bath first. He says he'll do it now. The man yells at Sandra. A group of men count out loud from 1 to 6, Lid says 7 and 8, performing the movements. He says that a dungeon is considered a subtype of a living creature, and explains that it is a place where dangerous monsters live, an excellent source of materials, and a good place for leveling characters. It is explained that for a dungeon to appear, its core deep underground first generates a massive amount of magical power over a long period of time. It is reported that when the magical power accumulates above a certain level, the entrance to the dungeon appears. It is said that at the same time monsters are born and Lid says that if a dungeon is left unprotected, monsters will escape into the outside world, so knights and adventurers protect dungeons. He explains that to destroy a dungeon, you need to descend to its very depths and damage the core, which will destroy the dungeon itself. The guild rules state that the guild has a system that generates requests internally, and freelance adventurers accept them. The more complex the request, the higher its rank and reward. Most requests in the Adventurers Guild are related to collecting items in Barty's territory. Lid says that when this future arrives, he hopes that the interlocutor will be married to Diana. The interlocutor exclaims in response that he says that Diana always comes to wake him up, but then she says that she won't wake him up forever because one day she will have a husband, and she says so. He explains that he asked not to mention it. The man asks why he is so unsure of himself, and says that Diana answered accurately. Lid says that when Diana made him breakfast for work, she explained that she was practicing for the wedding and that it wasn't specifically for him. The girl says that Rubens is just her friend and not in that sense, and when her parents hint at marriage, Diana responds that way. Lid says he just doesn't. The woman asks Rubens if he and Diana have memories just for him, and Rubens confirms. Rubens explains that as a child, he promised Diana he would become a knight who would protect her. The woman says he absolutely must go on a date with Diana. Lid tells Rubens that the knight must not hesitate, and that he knows Diana's character better than anyone. Rubens asks why Lid suddenly decided so. Lid asks Rubens to consider the true meaning of her words, after which Rubens repeats the true meaning. He says he finally got a good idea, and the boy says he understands. He explains that he can't spell everything out for him. The boy asks his brother what he's laughing about, and he replies that he's just laughing and that it's best not to tell anyone else yet, noting how complicated everything is. The woman says they used to play here often and calls it nostalgia. Lid asks what he wanted and what the gist of the conversation was. He tells Diana. Diana says that he says that as he heard later, they finally started dating. Lid says he wanted them to get married right away. Two birds are depicted on the upper right. On the lower right, a girl's foot is shown taking a step. On the lower left, a man is sleeping, making a creaking sound. The girl says it's morning and greets her brother. Then Lid says good morning to Mel and laughs. The girl explains she wanted to wake him up, but then becomes offended. Lid explains that recently Mel has been coming to wake him up in the mornings and is being too insistent, and he woke up. She says that after breakfast she returns to her room and sits down to study, preparing for a bright and radiant future, learning etiquette, languages, dancing, and so on. It is reported that this is an education for the gifted. Lid says she's only 4 years old now, which is why she's so active. He's sure mornings are a precious time for her, when she can spend time with her beloved brother, and that every morning someone tried to cheer Mel up. Lid says he's back. The girl greets her father, Chris, with. The girl with cat ears explains that Chris is not okay. He tells Chris, asking if he is okay. The man says that Her Majesty enjoyed chatting with her, but she didn't have time to relax on the road, so she should sleep in the guest room. The man tells Reed that he has something to talk to him about and suggests they go to his office. Reed reacts with surprise. The man explains that this time in the capital he's doing something. Lid watches silently. The guy expresses bewilderment. He tells Reed that he has suddenly changed so much. Lid says he put more pressure on his interlocutor, but he remained calm. He notes that he clearly isn't involved in children's work, including gifts, since there are no books with such knowledge in the mansion. He asks if he can explain this. The guy says he honestly didn't think so. He reports that he actually chose his words carefully, and that day he lost consciousness in the garden and remembered his past life. He makes a sound that expresses pain or tension. Memories from his past life and Reed's memories merged, and a new self was born. The personality was based on memories from his past life, but Reed's memories and feelings also carried weight. The maid says Reed felt guilty about what happened to his sister and the maids, and Lid says he respected his father and wanted to be just as strong. The text says there's something else. He says that he was desperate because he couldn't help his mother who was dying and therefore wants to protect his family and his mother. Lid speaks to Rhea. Rhea silently looks away and calls Lid by name. He says he should have spent more time with his son and admits that he failed as a father, then asks for forgiveness. He explains that he simply watched and had no idea, thinking that his son was doing it for himself, and admits that he didn't know how much despair was in his heart. Lid says he used knowledge from a past life and created a drug without telling anyone. He explains that he seems to have known about this world in a past life and asks if he saw the other one in a dream. The man asks what drug, and Lid replies that it's a drug that restores magical power. The man confirms. He explains that thanks to Nanali's drug, her life will be extended, but it is only a temporary solution and will not cure her. He says something in response with surprise. Lid asks if the man learned this from his past life knowledge and asks him to share if he knows anything else, promising to help. The man replies that, of course, he will. The man asks if he was summoned and asks Haroon to join the discussion. Haroon says he wanted to talk about one more thing. He asks what it is. Haroon explains that he's chosen Lita as his bride. He's surprised. Lid says there's no need to propose. It's already decided. The man asks when, and Lid explains that she thinks it'll be in a couple of months. Lid remains silent. The man reports that he was also surprised and that His Majesty raised this issue very unexpectedly for him. Lid says that it seems the princess is the same age as him, and that they are still just children, and they are already getting married. He explains that he is still too young for marriage. The man says that this time they will make an exception because the bride will be the princess of the kingdom of Renolith, and this is a political. He says he's right. The man tells him to prepare the plans and asks if he can gather the necessary information in a few days, assuring him that the government will cover the costs. The man explains that it's simple. He calls the man his father and says that they are the Margrave's family, and asks why the princess. Lid reports that the kingdom of Renolith is located on the border with their territory and also borders the kingdom of Barst and the Magnolia Empire, ruled by humans. He recounts that an incident once occurred between the kingdom of Barst and the kingdom of Renolith, which was nicknamed the Incident. The people of Barst hunted dark elves for slaves, which led to a deterioration in relations between the countries and made the situation extremely unstable. Renolith found itself in a difficult situation because the export of salts from the kingdom of Barst was suspended due to the disrupted trade. Lid explains that they were offered a political marriage to strengthen their alliance with the imperial family or equivalent aristocracy. He explains that the emperor has a son, but if the princess becomes the emperor's son's wife, it could lead to undesirable results, and Renolith could be. He explains that their remote margraviate was the perfect choice to send the princess away, and confirms that he is the son of imperial aristocracy and has no right to refuse. He says that he feels sorry for the princess, since due to her status as a vassal state, she will have to. Lid says that if he thinks so, he must become a husband who values her more than anything in the world, and asks if he can make the princess, betrayed by fate, happy, emphasizing that everything is in his hands. The man remains silent. He tells her to protect her as his princess and asks if he understands. He confirms that he understands. Lid says that the first princess of Renolith is named Farah Renolith. He reveals that Farah Renolith is his future wife. Lid explains that he later told his father about his desire to participate in the design of the extension and therefore asked him to allow him to visit the kingdom of Ren, at least for a short time. He says he can't really explain it, but it's connected to his memories from a past life and could help with his mother's treatment. He says there's still plenty of time before the marriage is announced, and he'll inform Renolith that he'll be going there unofficially, but only for a couple of days. He thinks. The man says he's confident that Lid will be able to make the princess of the Coraland kingdom happy, which will have a positive impact on their relationship, and also says she'll make a worthy young wife. Lid thanks him, says he feels a little better, and promises to try harder. Lid explains that he says that Chris is here and asks if she is sleeping. He quietly walks down the hallway and calls out to Chris. He explains that it is curiosity. He sees that Chris is sleeping and says that this is indeed the case. Lid says he's very tired. The girl says Chris is very beautiful and makes an MMM sound. The girl explains that it's the Empress. Lid is surprised and asks what she's dreaming about. Lid says she shouldn't have come in. He reports that the door is not opening and says that someone is standing behind the door. Lid opens the door. Mel exclaims, and the girl says that she will not let him go. The girl says he can't enter the girl's room without permission. Lid explains he just wanted to check on her and asks him to open the door. The girl in the bed says she's begging Mel. She says she's tired and that's why she fell asleep, which she didn't expect. The man tells her not to worry and thanks fate that he wasn't caught. A voice is heard asking for forgiveness and screaming faster until Chris wakes up. The man says he doesn't even know. The boy says he wanted to apologize for what happened in the capital and asks what happened there, since his father kept him in the dark. Lid reports that Chris told him about what happened in the capital, about the business with Count Roland, and how she, too, was kept in the dark. She also says that Count Roland was rude to Chris, not knowing that she was of noble birth, and the Emperor suggested punishing him. The man reports that Count Roland was very confused at the time, but Chris refused. The king asks the girl if she wishes anything else, and the girl says she would like to say something. The king tells her to speak, and he listens. Lid says he can't believe this happened. The woman states that from now on, she wants everyone to stop believing rumors and base their opinions on evidence, warning that if the nobles of the Magnolia Empire continue in this manner, their country will be despised in the diplomatic arena. The man says they should use this opportunity to reflect. Lid says he's very sorry their aristocracy is so uneducated and hopes the girl will forgive them. The girl laughs. He says that means all that remains is to wait and watch Roland. The woman says that those who were in Roland's faction have already lost their positions and will have no influence for some time. He calls her a great woman. The woman says that it's okay, Lida was sent. He asks. Lid explains that Roland's faction didn't just receive its count title. Roland worked well with the Magnolia Empire Chamber of Commerce and behind the scenes, preventing other countries' chambers of commerce from gaining influence. Lid explains that it was necessary to defeat this enemy. He says he's glad the negotiations were successful and that he's very happy that Christie's company came to Baldia, and thanks her for that. The woman explains that she's honored to hear this from Lid and that she's also very lucky to have met him, but at the same time, she says she wasn't recognized. Count Roland called Chris the stubborn horse of the Saffron Company, and Lid reports that it is because of how the Christie Trading Company was formed. It is reported that Chris was born into an elven trading company and had an older brother who, as the eldest son, would inherit the saffron company, but Chris's business acumen was much stronger than her brother's. Lid says she will support her brother from behind the scenes, and that's what Chris thought until people started talking. The voiceover states that Chris is destined to inherit the company based on her track record. He explains that, fearing the company's collapse due to internal disputes, she decided to become independent and establish a new trading company in Baldia territory so that her family's spheres of influence would not overlap with the new company. Lid reports that even if she is very talented, starting from scratch in an unfamiliar land is extremely difficult, and there were days when she could not achieve any results. He says that suddenly something has changed. The girl explains that it's true that sometimes even talent can't bring results without luck, and that luck only comes to those who work hard and try. She explains that she tried desperately and still struggled. Lid says his butler told him about Christie's company and that what he learned about Chris is thanks to her efforts. Lid says he doesn't know if these words will resonate with her, but he doesn't want to hear her downplay her accomplishments. He tells Chris that she has achieved a lot and asks where his self-confidence is. Chris is surprised and explains that everything is not as he says. The girl says she's had a lot of work and sometimes it's been incredibly difficult. Perhaps she's always longed for someone to recognize her. Lid says she's very glad this day has come. The woman thanks. He says that His Majesty will now work with her. The woman explains the terms. Prepare a month's supply. Sales at the market will begin after receiving the month's supply. Additional orders are not covered, and full payment is required in advance. The man apologizes for losing his temper, but he says everything is fine. The man says Chris used her connections at the saffron company to sign a contract with an aloe farmer, and she also sent orders for aloe to the Adventurers Guild. He says the market price for aloe will soon rise, and he'll buy it all right now. The woman says that Her Majesty the Empress will have her hands full for a while, and explains that Chris is also very good at advertising, and even won over the Empress to her side. He says that there are few people in this world as beautiful as Chris, and that she will win anyone to her side. Led says you can become as beautiful as Chris if you use their products, and that it's a great slogan that everyone will admire. The girl replies that she understands. Led reports that they continued the discussion and managed to persuade her to name the products Christie Lotion and Christie Hair Color. He tells them to stay optimistic, and the other man replies that it's good. The man says that they can now conduct business directly with Her Majesty and contact her through him if necessary. Lid reports that Empress Matilda is dangerous. The girl says that the Empress, no, and the Empress. Chris says that he even talks about Her Majesty in his sleep and, unless necessary, he would prefer not to get close to her. The woman reports that the room is quiet. He sits silently opposite her. The man asks how Lid knows he's talking in his sleep. Lid explains that he heard it while the man was sleeping. The man reacts to what he heard. He says that looking at a sleeping girl's face is the height of perversion. The girl with ponytails asks if she understood the situation correctly, and the man calls Lida by name. The girl with bangs between her eyes and another girl dressed as a maid address the man as Mr. Reed. A drop of water falls into the water, causing ripples on the surface. Lid reports that his heartbeat is so rapid that even concentrating on the sound of the dripping water doesn't help. Lid looks at his wounded hand. The woman says everything is fine and just needs to get it together. Coughing and coughing are heard. Then there's a knock on the door, and the woman invites them in and announces that the door is open. Lid says good afternoon. A man and a boy stand next to each other. The woman says she is the wife of Marquis Rainer Nanali. Baldia apologizes for her appearance. The girl smiles, and the man and the boy stand next to her. Sandra Ernest reports that she's doing magical research. Lid says he's amazed she looks so noble in her current state. He tells Nanali that until now he had hidden from her the name of the disease that was preventing her from living a normal life, and explains that he couldn't tell her this earlier because he was a coward. Lid says it's a fatal and incurable disease. The man says it's a magical power depletion disorder. The woman says she knew. He says he doesn't understand who told her. The girl tells her not to make such a scary face and that no one should do that. The woman says she figured out her condition herself, even if she didn't know the name of the disease, and she still figured out what exactly was wrong with her. She explains that her mother had long since accepted she was sick, but now at least she knows the name, and Lid asks Reed to forgive her for the painful memories she will cause him. Reed explains that he assumed Lid had a serious illness, but didn't think it was incurable. The woman says she's a useless mother for making her son worry. The woman tells him not to talk about it, and he explains that they're family and asks why he's so secretive. The woman explains that Melody always calls her by her full name and suggests calling her just Mel. The man yells at Reed to be careful and asks if he's thought about his mother. Lid says he knows how hard it was for her to go through everything alone. He explains that he knew she was terminally ill, so he simply looked away and dove headfirst into his work, leaving her alone. The man tells Nanali that he made a huge mistake and asks her not to worry, explaining that he understood perfectly well that she had other concerns. He listens. Lid says he loves a girl. The girl replies that she loves Lid too. He says he can't afford to be weak because he has to protect everyone. The boy listens. The man explains that he will always be there and support him. Lid says to get down to business. The woman tells Ms. Nanali to take a medicine that restores magical power, which won't cure her completely, but can alleviate the symptoms. The woman explains that the medicine doesn't taste very good, so it's best to wash it down with water right away. Ms. Nanali tries the medicine and reacts to the taste. Lid asks if she's okay. The woman makes a sound of surprise, and he and the man simultaneously call out for their mother. The woman says ha ha ugh. The woman screams for her mouth to open. Lid is breathing heavily. Lid tells Rainer not to give up and calls for her mother. Rainer tells his mother not to give up. The woman says she won't abandon the boy. He screams, "Don't abandon him," and calls for his mother. The boy exclaims. The man looks at Lid, who is kissing the girl. Lid says he met Nanali. He reports that when he was Arvin's assistant, he was working in the capital. The man says he even disguised himself. The man explains that it's just a census and asks Arvin if he really needed to go into town for this. Arvin, in disguise, says he just wanted to stroll around the city. Lid says he has two reasons. He wants to see the city and buy a gift for his wife. Lid repeats the word gift. He explains that it is very important that he is the one making the choice, and says that he could ask a servant to do the same or could have asked him. The man says that it has become quite difficult for his father to deal with state affairs, and the fact is that his father is not feeling well. The man says that in a couple of years he will have to Lid says he wants to see the landscapes he's supposed to be defending now. The man tells Arvin not to worry, that these are only his problems, and Arvin thanks him for going into town with him today. Lid asks if he can go over there. The man replies that he can, but not to overdo it. The man orders Dinas to stay with Arvin. Lid demands that he stop and let him go. The man laughs and offers to continue the conversation, but the girl says she's already received an official refusal and doesn't want to talk to someone with such a huge, and he is silent. Lid says he has no desire to even talk to them and orders them to leave. Logas, from Count Galliano's family, says he will remember this. He asks if the lady is hurt. The lady says she screamed, but no one came, and thanks him for his help. The lady explains that she is very grateful. Lid says they held up well. The man loudly asks Rainer if he's okay. The girl screams at Rainer. Top left. A girl says what a wonderful man he is. Top right. A woman tells Dinas not to shout her name at the top of his lungs. Below, he explains to the woman that they're actually here secretly. Forget it? Bottom left. A man says that even the girl's parents wouldn't mind, and she replies that she's never heard of him before. Lid says their approval is right here and offers to read it. The man explains that it's definitely written in his father's hand. He reports that the bride, the Crimson Lady, was hired by Ron Amos, who had previously refused all suitors and was said to be insanely beautiful. He says he had never seen her before. The image contains no text or speech from the characters, only an architectural landscape with a house, trees, and a car. Lid says it's her. The girl smiles silently. The woman says she thought they would never meet again and confirms that he remembers her. He says he didn't notice her then. The woman explains that she really is very beautiful. A woman says she now understands why she's called the Crimson Lady. A man asks what she means by that. The woman begins to answer, and the man listens intently. Lid says that the girl has very beautiful red hair and in general she is a very beautiful lady. The girl responds with an exclamation of A. The woman apologizes and explains that it's simple. The woman explains that the nickname was given to her when she was proposed to, and that she responded very harshly with a refusal, which is why the man was unable to recover from it. Lid says he had something else in mind. The girl says she's been labeled as a difficult character, and that she's so unapproachable that no one even has a chance. The woman says that she really liked the beautiful meaning behind her nickname, and now she even likes it. He tells the woman that the nickname is Crimson Lady. The guy tells Lady Nanali that he really likes her. Lid says that he would like the girl to become his wife and move to Bardio with him. The woman reports that the mistress drank the drug and asks Lid how much magical power she has. He speaks now and begins to measure the magical power. He begs, pleading to be heard. Lid reports that Nanali's remaining magic power is 101. The girl and the boy shout in response. He says it worked and turns to Sandra. The woman says, "Darling." The man calls Reed. The girl shouts, "Mom." And the guy calls, "Ms. Nanami." The woman says she's fine. The boy cries and calls for his mother. Afterward, the mother was examined by a doctor, who reassured her that another attack was not to be expected. After a joint discussion, it was decided that the mother should take medication 3 times a day, and, just in case, maids were stationed to keep an eye on her. Lid says it's a truly amazing drug that immediately restored 100% of her magical power. The man says no, it's thanks to Mr. Rayner. The woman explains that Mrs. Nanali couldn't open her mouth to take the medicine. So Mr. Rayner quickly filled his mouth with water and the medicine, and then did mouth to mouth. He says he got his bearings very quickly and calls his father amazing. The woman asks Sandra if she has any. Lid says she wants to give them some time alone now. He says the emperor clearly doesn't consider them important, since the marriage with the royal family or equal aristocracy was decided without them, and they didn't listen to their demands. He says he believes their country is not respected at all, and asks if the other person has read the letter. The woman says the marriage will be with some margrave's son, and they are still the same age. The man says everything has already been decided, turns to Maris, and explains that they can no longer influence this marriage and cannot afford to say they don't like their future husband. The man says that if any problems arise on their end, Lid says they should at least check whether the margrave's son has a worthy talent, and that he will resolve the issue. The man asks what he has in mind. He says he looks at Sandra and it seems to him that there is an adult hiding behind the child's body. Sandra says she realized they need time alone. He explains that he understands that this cannot be. The man says he wanted to consult with Sandra. He says that when the guy performs the remember spell, Lid explains that in a past life, someone told him that if something enters the brain even once, it will never be forgotten. Everything is stored somewhere deep within the brain. A man says he's been reincarnated and has memories from a past life, and that memory isn't just in the brain, but in the soul as well. He says this means there's a way to see the soul's memories. The man explains that this is similar to the theory of the living soul. He asks what the theory of the living soul is. The man, Lid, explains that the basis of the theory is roughly similar to their thinking. He says that this is one of the philosophies of this world. Lid says that it is clear. He explains that he simply pulls out memories himself, like surfing the web, and asks if the other person can handle it. He says it's not hard to imagine the web, but the key is to stay focused. He explains that ordinary people can't get here, but the other person is special. He says that next time, Lid informs him that this place is very fragile, and even though he was able to get in this time, he shouldn't come here again. He explains that it's dangerous and advises him to listen to his advice. Lid asks what his interlocutor's name is and suggests simply using magical power. He says that if needed, they will just call him by name. Then he pats the other Lid on the shoulder. He says that it is good and thanks, after which he waves his hand and says goodbye. The girl speaks to Mr. Lid. Lid screams and falls out of his chair. Lid says that he asks Sandra what's wrong and explains that they froze and sat in dead silence. And as soon as she approached, they screamed. Sandra says that's not her to ask. He asks if the body is okay and says that they haven't moved for quite a while. Lid says the last thing his memory told him was that he shouldn't come back, and explains that this world is fragile and one can get stuck in it forever. Lid then says it didn't work out and apologizes. The woman asks if he should tell Sandra about this, and apologizes. He says hi and asks if Reed is back. And Reed says he can hear him and asks if he didn't believe him. The woman asks what she needs. Lid says he doesn't need anything today, he just wanted to check. The woman says okay and asks to call him when she needs something. He asks his mother how she's feeling. The woman says she's feeling better than before, thanks to the medication. Sandra explains that they're still working on the dosage, but there haven't been any problems. The woman says they look like two cats. Lid says he must complete a cure that will cure her as soon as possible, and if he succeeds, he will be able to cure not only his mother but also others who suffer from this affliction. The man asks if they thought of anything offensive. The woman tells Reed he's so tense and asks him to take it easy. Reed says he's just lost in thought. The guy says they've set a date for the trip. The girl says to say hi to Rainer. The man asks Mr. Reed if it's time for him to go see Mr. Rainer. Lid says yes, he invited her and says he's going. He says that he's going to Renolith also for his mother's treatment, and explains that to create the medicine a lot of moongrass is needed, but they couldn't start growing it on their territory because it doesn't take root, so he'll have to go to Renolith. Lid reports that from his memories of the past, he realized that in the country of Renolith, with its developed agriculture, he would definitely be able to find information about medicinal herbs and find a solution. Lid explains that something is clearly brewing within the country, so vigilance must not be relaxed. The man explains that King Elias is trying to advance. He reports that there is a possibility that they are from his fiancée's faction. Lid explains that there are no impenetrable walls. Information can be obtained from any country, and information is what is needed to protect one's home. Lid asks how his son knows about this. The man says he has spies in Renolith. He says it's a good guess but won't say it outright. The boy explains that it's better to live in ignorance. The man tells Norris that he understands his point of view, but her future husband's father is Reed Baldia. Norris Tamasuka says that there is sense in the interlocutor's words, but they will not be satisfied with some kind of backup option. They wanted to achieve marriage with the imperial family. The man confirms that Mr. Norris is right and says it's true. Lid explains that through marriage, Norris planned to plant roots for their country deep within the empire, first ending Renault's vassal status and then taking control of the empire entirely. Lid reports. The boy asks for forgiveness. The boy approaches his father about Farah and asks if he really plans to send her away as a hostage and force her into marriage. The man asks who told the boy such a stupid thing and asks Norris for clarification. The man explains that Farah is only 6 years old and can't be sent away. Lid says that the connection with this country is very important and that when he becomes king, he will be able to understand the other man's decision. Lid can't accept this and asks if it is really necessary. The man explains that the other man is still too young, which is why he is so emotional. He tells her to go to her room and cool off, and then says he shouldn't have brought it up. The man notices the appearance of a girl and a man. Farah says good afternoon, brother, and explains that mom called her, which is why she's here. Lid says he talked to dad, lost his temper and dad got angry. Farah asks why Lid is here and is surprised that dad would be angry. He says that Farah is very beautiful and looks like her mother. Despite her young age, she received a good education. Her every movement is elegant and polished. Lid says he's proud of his little sister. The girl says, "You're going, brother." The man says it's time and the girl confirms it. He says that memory is a special magic he recently invented to delve into memories, and when he mentally accesses memory, it helps him find the information he needs. He asks how something exists. He then explains that while he talks to memory, the magical power is gradually expended, and this. Led says the person he was talking to constantly skipped dialogue and there was nothing useful there. Even digging through his memories, he only found bits and pieces of information. The man explains that he didn't really pay attention to the plot because the game was free and he was interested in other things, so he preferred to just skip through the main story and not spend much time on it. He explains that it is possible to extract only what he consciously saw or heard in a past life, and this includes videos he watched on the internet, the contents of textbooks from school days, complaints from colleagues that he listened to with one ear, conversations of random people, and uninteresting advertising, but this will either take a long time or not at all. Led tells the gentleman to watch his movements closely, and the gentleman makes a KH sound. Led breathes heavily and announces that it's over. He tells Rubens that this time everything will be different. Rubens rejoices and says that he hasn't lost yet. In the next panel, he and Rubens are fighting with swords. Lid says that experience, height, and weight still matter. There's still a difference between them, but he can win, and he feels the will to win born in his heart. Lid says that this doesn't apply to a fair fight. The guy says there's still a chance. The guy explains that he has to take advantage of the fact that he's a child. He says that if he can dodge one attack. Lid says he's surprised his interlocutor didn't give up after the sword clash and explains that the technique should be used against less experienced fighters. The man tells Mr. Lid that the idea is good, but the execution is poor. Mr. Lid sighs and admits defeat. The man suggests finishing with. He says they are too used to each other and laughs that they need a special teacher. Lid says he finds it hard to believe, given how challenging the training was, and thinks this is just the beginning. The man apologizes for the delay, as he had to finish work. He turns to Mr. Rayner and asks if he's finished yet, and the girl shouts, "Father!" Lid says he wanted to personally test his interlocutor's abilities and isn't going to hold back, urging him to fight at full strength. The man reflects that his first battle with someone other than Rubens will be with his father, and wants to test just how much stronger his father is. The man says he wants to test it and agrees. He then speaks. The man explains that at his age, Lid has so much strength and asks if he has mastered the enhancement, and then says that he is already afraid. He and the man exchange sword blows. Lid says he'll attack then. Lid asks what's going on and if it's over, calling the situation pathetic. The guy with the sword lunges, Lid parries the attack, and the guy reacts tensely. He breathes heavily and prepares for a fight. The man suddenly strikes from above downwards. Lid asks if he intends to continue the fight and says he's lost his sword. The man explains that he'd like to know how strong his courage is. The boy responds by asking what courage is. The man explains that it's the strength of spirit that keeps you from wavering, adding that it's okay to do it this way. He says, "Let's begin." The man asks what this is and what this feeling of intimidation is. He notices it. The guy is surprised. Lid kicks the man, causing him to stumble backwards. The man screams in pain, covering his face with his hand. He says that the boy here seems to be the right age for his age. He demands that he stand up and explains that he told him not to look away. The boy responds with an ah sound and closes his eyes. Lid says he's sorry and explains that for the first time, he felt killing intent and fear in front of a real sword. He says he felt as if his father was actually going to kill him, and even though he knew he wouldn't, he felt fear in front of a real sword. The man says it's okay. Everyone's like that at first. He says that the fear he felt is something he will have to overcome in a real fight to gain courage. And without courage, fear will always grip him, meaning only death awaits. He explains that it is also impossible to live without fear, because without it, a person will be overly reckless. The man explains that Mr. Rayner's teaching methods are unique and warns that he won't be able to help. Lid asks if he's okay with it. Lid says he wants to be trained. The man wishes him luck. He says that he's about to swing his sword again and orders everyone to keep their eyes open and watch his movements closely. The guy reacts to this by making a sound. Lid says it's scary, but a necessary measure to increase survivability in combat. He says it looks like he's about to get hit and warns her to watch her sword. The man explains that she shouldn't close her eyes. He tells Reed to go behind the line and get to Rubens, while he himself will attack the whole time. The man explains that it won't be a problem for Lid to closely monitor his movements. Lid says he understands everything and has no choice. The man wishes Mr. Reed luck. The boy runs towards Lid, who strikes him with his sword. He quickly parries the boy's attack. The boy says he's fast, and Lid tells him he has a chance to win. The boy explains that thanks to the first lesson, his eyes have adjusted. Lid says the main thing is to keep an eye on the sword. A shoed foot appears on the grass. He speaks to Rubens and Rubens speaks to Mr. Reed. Lid announces that they'll be holding this training every time. The child is surprised, asking if it's every time. The man says that's all for today and he'll try to participate in every training session. Lid explains that his father's fencing is merciless, and until now he's only trained with wooden swords. The boy says he's unlikely to say it himself, but he's actually very happy and has long wanted to train with Lid. He explains that, as always, he is not good at showing it. The boy says he understands and calls Lid his father. Mel yells at her brother. The woman asks what's wrong with Mel. The girl says she hates and accuses her father of bullying her brother. The man is surprised and asks what happened. The girl cries and says she hates. The woman apologizes and explains that Ms. Maldi really wanted to see Mr. Lead. He says the training is over and asks them to go, turning to his brother. The man explains that his father did this on purpose to toughen him up and asks him not to say such things to him. He explains that he understands, although he doesn't like it. The man calls him a good girl. The caption says a little time has passed. Lid says Maldai hates him. The girl behind the door calls her father Daddy and screams at Maldai. The girl tells her brother to come back quickly. The girl calls him brother. He tells Mal that he's leaving everything here for him. He calls Mal by name. The man watches silently. The girl addresses the man, calling him Dad, and he responds. The girl asks her dad to come back quickly too. The man explains that one leg is here and the other is there and asks if it's true. The girl hugs the man's leg tightly, surprising him. The man is closed. The girl says she can leave Ms. Nanali in her care. The man explains that he's the master regarding this magic. Lid says he knows. The girl says it's a promise. The girl says they're moving forward. He says forward to Renolith. Lid reports that while Reed was traveling to Renolith in a carriage, two monsters met in the Forest of Evil to the east of Renolith. A forest landscape is shown with rain and a hollow tree containing a teardrop-shaped creature. The text states that this is Chapter 13. Slime says he didn't expect to see a green snake here and that he was caught off guard. He says he doesn't want to die and doesn't want to be eaten. The snake makes a loud noise. The wolf lets out a loud roar. The dragon hisses and screams, and the wolf growls back. The slug expresses surprise. The cat bites and holds a piece of meat in its mouth. The man reports that it is amazing. The man says what a cool black cat. Lid says a slime has found its way here, calling it a slime. He explains that in this forest, where many monsters live, they are the most numerous and are at the very bottom of the food chain. The slime lives in constant fear of those stronger than itself, like prey, and decides to separate itself from the others. It says that if it remains in plain sight with everyone, it will be eaten, so it needs to hide. While the slime was hiding and living a peaceful life, it was discovered by its natural enemy, the green one. The man says listen. The guy asks why the girl is following him. The guy is breathing heavily. The black cat says he can come in, explaining that if he just throws the slime, it will be eaten immediately, and he won't be able to sleep. He says to let the slime live, and if there's a water shortage, he'll drink it. The black cat tells the slime he's back, and the slime is surprised. Lid says everything is clean here. The insert shows that there used to be bones and trash here. He says you tried hard and informs her that you ate the remains of the food and the bones. The man explains that this is gratitude for cleaning and that he didn't bring the meat specifically for her. He says there is. The black cat says they can stay here, but they need to clean, and asks if the slime understands his speech. The text explains that black cats are bad at cleaning, and from that day on the black cat went hunting and the slime cleaned. They lived like that, not speaking the same language but understanding each other. A boy tells a black cat it's time to wake up and go hunting. The black cat replies that he'll go when he's hungry. The boy is surprised that the slime is talking and asks if he can hear its voice. The slime explains that it's been wanting to talk to him all along. The boy says he's never heard of a slime using magic and calls it a difficult slime. The slime is delighted and says that it's because of his strong desire. It is reported that the slime and the black cat continued to live together and got along very well, and there are also rumors that even two. Lid says the forest is very dangerous and he'll take you to a place where there are fewer monsters. He says someone is in charge there and that he's driven them away. He reports that they have arrived. Slime says it wants to show something and calls the black cat. The black cat is surprised and calls Slime. Lid looks at Slime and notices it's showing something. Lid closes her eyes and then opens them. The cat asks how it happened and says he couldn't make black fur, only white. And the other cat replies that it's perfect. The dark cat exclaims and says the other cat is very sweet, then asks her to remember the promise she made. The white cat asks if she remembers. The cat asks the wolf if he remembers, and he replies that he does. The wolf ponders what attracts him to the slime, its race or its appearance, and explains that the slime has learned magic to take on a form similar to his. The cat says the word slime. The wolf says that the slime is for his sake. The black cat tells the white cat that he wants her to be his wife and that they will spend their lives together. The white cat looks at him with tears in his eyes. The black cat says he won't repeat himself and always means what he says, demanding agreement. The white cat says he's glad to hear it, but he's slimy and asks if the black cat is sure. The white cat expresses surprise. The black cat confesses his love, and the white cat reciprocates. The cat reports that in the evil forest, a strange love affair was born between a slime and a black cat. The man says, by the way, Lid reports that they will eventually meet a human child who will feel a strange power, and adds that this is a different story. Renolith is said to include the Baldia family himself, his father, Rubens, Diana, and the Knights, as well as the Christie Merchant Guild to establish trade links with Renolith. They are said to have continued their journey safely and reached the post. Lid says he'll go rest first. The man asks how things are going with the memory search he asked for, and Lid replies that there's nothing particularly worthwhile so far. The man explains that they're told that a prince named Lasis lives in the place they're heading. Renolith and asks. The guy tells her he has black hair, yellow eyes, and the classic dark elf skin, and suggests she remember that in case she meets him. He says that's what he looks like. The girl admires him and says it's cool. The guy jokes that being the stepbrother of a tsundere. The boy says hi and enters the room. Lid asks what's wrong and apologizes for disturbing her while she's resting. Lid explains that she wanted to give Reed a lollipop she made herself from medicinal herbs, as she'd heard he gets carsick, and she often suffers from it herself. The woman says she always carries them with her and hopes he likes them. He says she's a goddess. Lid says thank you very much and says that from tomorrow onwards she will try her best, and the man shouts hooray. He reports that the Renolith outpost is already visible there. Lid announces that this is the guest house where they will be staying and will now call the person in charge, addressing Mr. Liner and Mr. Reed. Zach Riverton greets them and explains that he manages the mansion and will be accompanying them during their stay, and wishes them a warm welcome. The woman tells Mr. Zach that they're counting on him again. He speaks again, and the man explains that he's merely acting as a homing pigeon and has helped before, when information was exchanged between the capital and Renolith. The man explains that the mansion is decorated in a style as close to mag as possible. Lid says there are hot springs here and asks them to relax and enjoy. Lid is surprised and calls it simply paradise. The man in the water says that this might also seem unusual. The man announces that they have finally arrived. The woman greets Mr. Reed. Lid asks what the outfit is and is surprised, calling Diana by name. Diana explains that while they are in Renolith, she will be Master Reed's bodyguard and maid, and if she needs anything, don't hesitate to ask, adding that this is a special uniform for this purpose. Lid says that then. He says that's enough and he understands and asks to stop. The man asks if he's sure and says he wants to add something. The guy asks Diana why she has so many hidden weapons and whether knights even use them. Diana explains that not all knights use them. She explains that men and women are built differently, and sometimes it's impossible to win in a head-on confrontation. For her, hidden weapons are a way to compensate for the difference. Lid says that Rubens, who used to be a crybaby, tried so hard. The man asks if that's true and if it was all for Rubens. The girl confirms that it's possible, yes. In the bottom panel, the boy says he tried his best. He says no, and that she did it primarily for herself, not for him. The girl says that in any case, while they are in Renolith, she will be Mr. Lid's servant and once again asks for his favor. It is said that the daughter who will soon marry the Prince of Magnolia will be accompanied by a personal guard when she goes to Magnolia, and usually this means that they want to get rid of the guards. Lid explains that she immediately realized, as soon as her father offered the task, that her brothers, envious of her swordsmanship, would probably complain about her, and that she sometimes felt resentful about being exiled abroad, but said nothing and accepted it. Then Lid says, okay. He says the main thing is to hone his swordsmanship. The woman explains that the angle of his right hand is too soft and asks him to be aware of his role, as he is the princess of this country. He expresses surprise, and the girl apologizes. He explains that at 12 years old, he became the princess's sword. Lid says that the princess must be an example for the people and that mistakes are unacceptable, and that they must be perfect. The man shouts for them to wait for him and calls out, "Hey!" The boy asks if this is too strict. The man explains that this is an order from His Majesty and Lady Eltia and asks if there is a problem with this. He apologizes and reports that they have wasted time again calling for everyone to gather. The text notes that such strictness seemed excessive for. Lid says he was told that Princess Farah lived like this even before he became her bodyguard, and that the rumors about her future marriage into the Empire are true. He reports that in addition to training Renolith, she studied the culture of the Magnolia Empire, its government, and aristocracy. A woman drinks tea. He tells her that, while spending time with her, he began to want to be her support. The man asks the princess if she's having a hard time, to which she replies that everything is fine and she's used to it. Asna says thank you for caring. Lid turns to Asna. The girl says that pain and severity are not a problem. She just has to endure and try. Then the girl starts to speak, but stops. The girl says that when her mom and dad don't pay any attention to her, she feels a little sad. The woman speaks to the princess. Lid informs Farah that her future husband is to be the Prince of Magnolia and orders her not to become attached to the margrave's son under any circumstances. Farah understands her mother but still says that. The woman says that until now, everything was decided by her mother, and she hardly chose anything herself, so she wants to decide for herself whether to allow this man to be near her, since he himself came to her. The woman says that once, in order to feel the atmosphere of Magnolia before the wedding, she secretly went to the lands of Baldia, and for the first time saw. Lid asks if the boy who helped him back then is still alive and hopes that he is doing well. Lid also says that the painting depicts a woman combing her hair and saying that they will meet again someday. He looks at the painting and says that it is such a beautiful and skillful work. Hearing a knock on the door and the door opening, a woman in uniform asks Lid if she liked the painting, and the man tells her it depicts a very beautiful woman. The woman explains that Lid has a romantic nature, and Lid, embarrassed, says he's just a little bit in love. The servant reports that this is a painting of Lady Eltia, Lord Elias's concubine. He says that Lady Eltia is Princess Farah's mother. He is surprised and asks if he really fell in love with his future wife's mother. The girl explains that Lady Farah looks very much like her. Lid says that Mr. Zack is against his marriage with Princess Farah, isn't he, and that he has no right to say anything, but just wants the princess to be happy. He says he understands. Lid reports that in Renolith, attitudes toward House Baldia vary widely. Some are hostile, some are neutral, and some are supportive. Father said that His Majesty Elias seems to favor their alliance, so in that case, they need to enlist this man's support. The man says he asks for support, turning to Mr. Zack, and asks how he will react to this. Mr. Zack remains silent. The man says he will be happy to support. Lid says he made a promise and recorded it, then Lid thanks. The woman says that Mr. Line's son is the real future, and the man asks if he's been up to no good again. Zack Rivorton reports that he asked for support for his love affair with the princess, and at the same time, he immediately grasped the political situation in Renolith and his own position. Lid explains that this Reed would do well to learn to hide his claws. Zach Rivorton explains that he personally is entirely. The man on the left says that the organization Zach secretly leads is Renolith's intelligence agency, and he receives orders directly from the king and Blizek to Elias, and that such a man says he'll support his son is very encouraging. The man talks about tomorrow's audience with the king. Norris's actions. Norris apologizes for the intrusion and turns to Mr. Racist. Racist says everything is going according to plan and thanks Norris for accepting his offer, noting that he can now be of use. Norris explains that his father is back today. Racist. The man explains that King Elias loves only Lady Eltia, and that the fact that Farah rarely sees Racist is Eltia's fault, since she doesn't love him. He explains that His Majesty visits Queen Liesel Mish only occasionally, but comes to Eltia every day. The man, Racist, began to notice how his mother sometimes smiled sadly. The woman says that this is the first time she has worn such clothes and it feels strange. Then she asks if this is true. Lid says it suits Farah very well. Farah asks if it's true and thanks Asna. Farah wonders if her fiancé will like her. The woman reports that she is sure that yes. The girl says that even in her opinion, she looks especially beautiful today. Lid says that she will definitely like it. The woman says it's good. First, there's a knock at the door. The woman announces that she sees the girl finally wearing the dress she sent. The girl thanks the woman for the gift and calls the woman Mom. The man replies, yes. Lid says the words are sharp, like icy needles, and they certainly don't feel like home. He explains that the groom this time is the son of a marquis, not a prince, but he has no right to disgrace Renolith and asks if she understands that. The girl replies that if he proves worthy. The woman says she'll go ahead. The man asks Farah if she's okay. Farah is breathing heavily. The girl says she's already gotten used to it. Lid says that, after all, he's still a candidate for the groom and it's unlikely they'll send a completely worthless guy, and it's up to her to decide what to do next. He says he thinks so. The girl says Asa is very kind. The man asks if the girl knows anything about him, to which she replies that she only knows his name. The girl says that she thinks his name is Reed Baldia, and the man understands. The girl repeats the name Reed Baldia. The girl says they need to make sure the Marquis' son is suitable for their princess, and that it's important. The man asks if she's talking about this, and Lid says he already told her to do it and thanks her for the preparations. The man turns to Lid, asking if he can take the initiative regarding the week. The man says that rudeness cannot be tolerated, because even if he is a marquis, he is a nobleman of the empire. Another man says that of course, then. The man says that he will definitely marry the queen to a member of the imperial family, which will give Renolith a real boost to prosperity, and explains that he probably just tells himself that, although no one has any hope for him anyway, calling him a fool. Lid says he can't understand why he can't do it. He says he doesn't look weird and at the same time explains that he's thinking. The girl asks how many times Lid has been checking all this since this morning, and Lid reacts with surprise. Lid tells Diana that if she'd been watching, she could have told him he looked just like a noble girl going to a prince. Diana repeats the phrase, noble girl. The girl explains that Reed is very. The man says it's time and Liner is already waiting. He says he's on his way now. The dark elf reports that he's been told that the leader of the opposition is an elderly dark elf named Norris, and that Prince Racist also seems to be under his influence. Lid says he didn't think the dark elf would get the information so quickly. The dark elf thanks him. The man explains that her goals are apparently different from Norris's, and he doesn't know her true intentions. He says the main problem is Racist, and if he's under the influence of Norris, who views me with hostility, then that's the most difficult part. The man reports. Lid says he doesn't mean to make Norris crazy, but right now it's fair to say Norris is literally blinded by him. The man asks, break a heart. He explains that he was an intelligent prince who genuinely cared about the country, but due to an accident, he fell under the influence of Norris. His behavior contradicts the image of a prince, and he is in an unstable mental state. He asks to break this influence. The man explains that this can be considered a request. Lid says, what a twist. The man explains that he simply asked a question, and in response received a whole official commission from the nobles, and explains how it all came together. The man says this is a chance to make a name for himself, but he asks why he's so attached to Norris. The man apologizes and says he's not at liberty to talk about it. He explains that he'll try his best to open his eyes and expresses gratitude for his agreement. The man asks if Zack will be coming, to which the other man replies. The goblin says he's looking forward to seeing how they perform. A man in uniform asks if the man in front of him is Marquis Baldia. Baldia confirms and requests an audience with His Majesty Elias. The text explains that they'll be traveling by carriage to the palace, where the ceremony will take place. The soldier asks to take off his shoes here. Lid says, "Wow." The woman explains that everyone is already waiting behind this door. He explains that the map shows the area where the attack took place and reports that the enemy used magic to cover their tracks. The man in uniform explains that reconnaissance has discovered several possible enemy escape routes and suggests splitting up to pursue them. He says they need to act quickly to avoid missing them. Lid says he feels interest, distrust, suspicion, and curiosity. He says, "Let's go," then looks surprised. The man explains that they received word that only Marquis Baldia was invited to the audience with His Majesty Elias, so only one chair was prepared. He understands that this man. Lid tells Reed that she'll stand by her father and that everything is fine. Reed asks what he thinks. Reed notices that this is the same tone that his father uses when he's truly furious. The man looks at Reed with a serious expression. Reed asks if his father doesn't particularly feel sorry for him. He says, "Calm down." A man and a woman stand silently next to each other. The man puts his finger to his lips and exhales. In the foreground, the man and woman are surprised. Lid informs them that they should kneel and bow slightly until they are ordered to raise their heads, to which Lid replies that he understands. The man explains that Baldia, Marquis of the Borderlands, has arrived from the Baldia holdings of the Magnolia Empire. A man signals everyone to look up. A man in a white uniform sits on a throne, with 4 women standing next to him. One of the men in white looks serious, while the girl in the dress looks surprised. Lid reports that he can't afford to relax. The girl announces that she is the princess of the kingdom of Renolith, the daughter of His Majesty Elias Renolith. The girl says her name is Renolith. Lid is surprised. The girl says she's glad to meet you, he replies. Farah says Lid says Farah. A woman says she wonders what her ears mean. Yelsha Rivorton reveals that she is Farah's mother and the model in that painting. Racist Renolith says her name. Liesel Renolith reveals that she is Elias's wife. Elias Renolith says he would like to maintain a good relationship with Lid. Lid says he didn't expect to be asked right there, but he's been thinking about it for a while and is considering the best way to respond. He explains that since Norris supported Rysis's words, he doesn't want him to make an impression, although he's interested in Raysis, but first, he needs to focus on. He says that he must do what he fears most and states that he is convinced that the alliance between Renolith and the House of Baldia must take place at any cost. Then he speaks clearly. A group of elves reacts to this. One of them says, Another is surprised. The girl explains that Renolith and the Baldia holdings border each other, and by strengthening ties, they will create a deterrent for neighboring states. Citing Barist as an example. A man in military uniform. Barlst's perspective, they might consider an alliance with Magnolia ineffective, but a marriage with their neighbors, Baldia, would radically change the situation. The man explains that Baldia is a margraviate with the right to mobilize independently. The man with the mustache says that's true, and the other man laughs. He says that it makes sense and there's only one thing left to do. He explains that if Balst believes that anyone who dares to attack Renolith will see Baldia raise its troops, and that's how the effect will be amplified. The man explains that when deploying troops, defense comes first, and if Barist attacks only the border, they won't be able to act without official orders. Moreover, the alliance itself won't allow Baldia to immediately advance. Lid confirms this is true and calls the man her father. The woman. He explains that these are just the words of a child and should not be paid attention to, but the influence of marriage on restraint cannot be ignored. The man says TS and looks down with a serious expression. Lid says there are other arguments, but she'll discuss them after the marriage. The man asks if Lid thinks it's primarily against the Barost. The man laughs and says he has other ideas. The man with long dark hair explains that Mr. Liner's son is frighteningly smart. Such an unconventional boy will become the Marquis's heir, and if he were their enemy, they wouldn't even be able to sleep peacefully. The man with long dark hair. A man asks to be excused and addresses another man, calling him Your Majesty. The second man responds to the address. Lid reports that instead of meeting Princess Farah, for some reason, everything turned into a duel at court. The man turns to Lid. The girl says she's handing over the sword. He thanks her. He asks if it's a wooden sword. The girl explains that the equipment they prepared was extremely poor quality, and it looks like someone wanted to embarrass Lid, but she personally picked out the sword, so there's no need to worry. The girl says. The woman says not to spare the one who was rude and to do it at all costs. Lid says they're arguing about something and notices it's taking a while. The man apologizes to Lid for the wait and explains that they were forced to urgently replace his opponent. Then the elf announces that his son is racist Renolith. He says he doesn't understand. The boy says he doesn't believe he'll have to fight the prince. The girl and the man wish Mr. Lid luck. Lid says, by the way, the man says that before they come here, perhaps they should break Ricus's heart first. And this is a request from the nobles who care about Renolith's future. He says that's what he knew, Zach. The man responds with a question, expressing bewilderment. Lid asks what the smirk is about. The man explains that he just suddenly remembered something funny, and he's smug about it and he doesn't like it anymore. The man says that it looks like they're both ready. The man announces that a duel is about to take place between Mr. Reed and Racist, and explains that the rules are simple. The fight ends if one surrenders or if it becomes impossible to continue the fight. The woman says she has nothing to say and asks if Lid is tongue-tied. Lid says that anyone can say anything about him and that he speaks Baldia well, but he won't allow anyone to say anything bad about his mother, who is still battling her illness. Lid explains that Norris set it up. The woman says they'll start the duel then. The man calls Lid a naive prince and hopes he'll succeed. The woman warns him that if he surrenders now, he won't have to suffer anymore. Lid tells him not to bother and asks if he's only strong in words, prince, and then explains that he's only being kind in words. The man shouts that he's speaking kindly to him and asks what he said. The guy suddenly advances, he screams. He throws a punch, the guy parries it. He says he doesn't understand what's happening. Lid grabs the man by the arm and throws him abruptly to the ground. The man screams. 3 onlookers, a man, a girl, and a woman, are surprised, and another man declares that this is impossible. The man states that he can't believe this happened and says that he is not going to give up. He explains that he is not going to let this happen and that he will fight to the end. Lid says something in response to the unexpected action. Lid grabs the man's clothes. The man falls to the ground and Lid steps back. He says that in the end these are just words and asks if the other person sees it. The dark-haired man listens. Several men and elves pass by. Racist says that can't be and asks what that means. The girl says that Mr. Reed is so stunning. The guy and the girl say "AU" at the same time. Lid reports that he finally understood. He says that there is simply a colossal difference in level between them. The man tries to say something, but he orders him to stand up. The man explains that he asks if he is not the proud prince of Renault and says that he will lose to the one whom he himself insulted by calling. Lid says that the interlocutor gave him a fake wooden sword and dressed himself in protection and uniform, and then asks if he is ashamed. He says he won't forgive so easily and orders her to get up. The man remains silent. The guy lies silent on the ground. Lid says he'll destroy his pride and asks if he'll get up after that. Lid says that if the guy doesn't intend to fight, he can admit defeat. He says that if he doesn't act, he will be seen as a pathetic, weak-willed coward and a weakling, and adds that he thought Prince Racist could become a wise king like his father Elias. The man shouts that he is not a weakling and will definitely knock Lid down. He stands calmly. The man looks, Lid is reflected in his pupils, Lid is smiling.